Good evening and Vande Mataram to one and all. My name is Anshul Agarwal and I am the co-founder at XR Central. And today we'll be talking about a very interesting topic, very close to our hearts, which is around games. You know, we've grown up playing games. We all have grown up hearing stories. So we thought, you know, on this occasion of this International Museum Day at the International Museum Expo, it'll make a lot of sense to talk about how are games created, what is the history about games, how old are games, and you know, how can museums really take a lot of lessons and primarily involve games in their own strategies. So we have a pretty fun-filled and an informative session today. So as I said, for today's conversation, we will be talking about a quick intro about who we are and you know what are our credentials, how are we really relevant when it comes to game and why should you really listen to us. Then we talk about what games and what are its definition, how are they really relevant to the museums, and then you know there are a lot of case studies that we have really picked up globally which talks about what the well-known museums are doing and how they're actually making the use of games to engage audience, and you know what sort of an impact is that really bringing out. So, a very quick introduction about who we are. We have been in the gaming industry for close to 8 years now. We have been reviewing a lot of games. We are ourselves avid gamers. We have been publishing games, and we have now, and we are really proud of the fact that we have come to a stage where we have now launched our own platform, which is called as MetaCube, which is a do-it-yourself or a build-it-yourself gaming platform. You know, it uses a lot of 3D technologies, 3D rendering, multiplayer environments, a lot of communication layers, and now it's so easy, each one of you can actually be a gamer yourself. You know, you don't need a knowledge of any sort of coding, any design. You can just drag and drop and, you know, build in your algorithms and your game is ready to be published. Yeah, we need to. Just give us a moment. I think there was some mix-up with the presentation.
वही 40 ना देखेंगे ना मैंने उसे तो तुम बोलो तुम क्या
माइक चाहिए क्या अभी? लाइट है?
एक मिनट
एक लाइट और है फिर यहाँ तुम देखिए
अभी बोलो ना
देखे क्या
ले जाओ मतलब
मैं लेके चला
टेस्ट करना पड़ेगा
सेट करना पड़ेगा
तो ठीक है फिर मैं ये लेके चलता हूँ वहाँ रख के नहीं हो पाएगा लेके चलता हूँ वहाँ से फिर आप इधर आएंगे आप खुद को सोचो चलने का तो आप ही के लिए बोलता है
लगा के सेट कर देना
ये कैमरा बंद हो गया क्योंकि
सही नहीं है ना
इसके भी दिक्कत है
होगा तो फोन कर देना
माइक का
नहीं ऑफ कर दिए उसको ऑफ कर दिए ऑफ है और पता है ना वहाँ पे जब हम
खुद का टाइम तो फ्लाइट पे ही उसके बाद एक पार्ट
Okay, looks like we're back on live. Sorry about the delay. So as I was mentioning, we have built a platform called as MetaCube, which is a build-it-yourself gaming platform, which is very well suited for the metaverse and the Web3 ecosystem that we hear. It's all 3D, it's all multiplayer. There's a lot of communication to interact and engage. And the best part is you don't really need a knowledge of any programming language or any design language. You can just come in and start creating your games by dragging and dropping, which will be published across devices like smartphones, PCs, tablets, and even a VR headset. So you can be proud of the fact that now you all can be a VR developer yourself without a particular knowledge of any coding and design. Now here are some of the fun facts, which we thought we should really share when it comes to gaming. The curiosity that we have as avid gamers has always been, how old are games? Why are games relevant? What is it about them that there is a lot of stickiness? Why do we keep on spending hours and hours every day playing and engaging with them? A quick fun fact, we've seen what this is. These are the rolling dices. We all play games, whether it's Snake and Ladder, Ludo, but do you know how old are they? The last known, the oldest fact that we have, it's that they are 3,000 years old. They were found in an excavation done in Iran, right? So, but some archaeologists, they also say that they're even older than 3,000 years. Now, moving on, if you see, we all play board games. We've played Monopoly, we've played Life, Ludo, Snake and Ladders. How old are they? They're actually older than even a dice. The earlier prints that was found for board game was actually called as the Senet board, which was played by the Egyptian civilization. And they go back to 5,000 years old, which is dated to 3,500 BC. There is a game called as Backgammon. It's from Iran, and it actually dates back to 600 AD. And it's also, if you see on the image, there is dice on it. There are these checkerboards, on it, and it's a multiplayer game. So now, if you see the trend, there was dice, and then there were 2 dice, dice, and then there were board games, and then it all went to multiplayer games. We all know dominoes, tiles. We keep playing them, even in today's day and age, right? And if you see, they can be traced back to almost 3,000 years. So that's the sort of a history of where, you know, games and the type of messaging, the storytelling, the heritage that they bring to the table. How could I miss chess? You know, it's something which was invented in India, and we should be proud of the fact that, you know, it can be dated back to the 6th century. Of course, it was when it got invented in various different names. Now, today, you know, more than 1,500 years later, the proud fact is that chess has really picked up in 172 countries. So, you know, that's the power of games. So what I'm trying to essentially say is that games could be traced back to the times when even the mankind started, and that's how relevant, how significant they are. They have been thought about as a global phenomena. Every game has some sort of a heritage to share. And you know, what better platform to really talk about games and what could they really bring to the art and culture field. So we thought, you know, let's take a step back and think about what actually is a game. You know, we did this exercise within our office where we asked our colleagues and friends to really just give one word answers to what a game really means to them if they have to define it. So here are some of the answers that we really got. One was, a game is a language. Now it's a very interesting one because games, when we talk about a language, it's a universal language which is understood by people. It's understood across boundaries, right? It connects people. You know, game, the other response we got is a storytelling medium. You know, games, every game that you pick up, essentially if you look at their gameplay pretty precisely, they all have a narrative. They all have a story. Whether it's a role-based game where you have to really rescue or complete a few quests, or whether it's just a mission-based game. So all of them have a story around it. And you know, if we take a look at the art and culture and even the museums, all of them are preserving, conserving, and promoting that story. So what a better way to really engage the audience, tell them about it through a storytelling medium, which is a game. The third response that we got was emotion. Now, some of the games that you might have played make you feel angry. Some of the games that you play, you actually go out and play because you want to let your rage out. You know, we do it every day, you know, and there are a lot of games you just play when you're happy. So it's all about emotions. It's all about the mood that you play with. Games have also been thought about as a medium, which is, as I just said a couple of slides ago, that it's an age-old method of communicating. And if you took a look, if you revisit the slides that I just showed, it says it's a multiplayer scenario, you know. So multiplayer games, you know, how people, how communities are talking to each other, how communities are being built is actually through a game. The next one is pretty interesting. It talks about skills. There are a lot of genres of games that we know, and you know, Shrey will be talking through a few of the genres later on in the conversation. But you know, they require skills. Whether, let's suppose, you're managing and curating your own museum. Now that requires a certain type of strategy, certain type of skill levels that you'll need. So, you know, either you learn them or either you would have them, and then if you already have them, it just gives you a score and it tells you, you know, where can you really improve. So it's also a learning medium. Third, the second last is around the heritage. You know, as we see the game, the game that I mentioned around backgammon, it's actually a game which is really, really old, as I mentioned, but it's even played today. So it's a newer version which is out there in the market of the board game, but every time, you know, people pick that up, they are really connected to their roots. So that's how the heritage is also being shared, and as I already mentioned about the building community. Moving on, we know now what games are, but why do we play them, right? Because this is going to be the point of communication, this is going to be the point of engagement with the game and the type of messaging that we need to really drive. Every day, most of us may be doing a 9-to-5 job, so we want to really escape the mundane. How do we really unwind ourselves? How do we shift our emotion, as I said? How do we, if we are really sad, if we are really lonely, how do I really go about and change the mood? So I may actually pick up my smartphone and start playing a game. It could be as simple as a Mario. Second one is pretty interesting, as it says, your game, your rules. You may not be the boss in office, right? You may not be the boss at home, but at game, yeah, you are. You decide your own rules. You decide what to do, right? So that's something as we also called as the expressions. How easily, with how much of freedom are you able to express yourself? Third is be a trophy hunter. Now, in games, there is a phenomena which is called as collectibles. We all play games, and we keep on playing games. I know so many of our friends, and a couple of them are sitting right there in the audience. They keep on playing games. They'll, just spend hours and hours and hours just to get a trophy or unlock a particular type of a car or unlock a particular type of a gun. And they feel so proud when they come back. So it's also a confidence booster to them. Third is create your own plan. Now, there are so many genres of game. Now, it's not necessary that if I like a particular genre, then Shrey may like a particular genre. But then I can actually bring like-minded people in that group and we can all have a discussion. So that's where we say, if you want to really create your own plan, that's something, you have to start playing games. Last is around to game is to learn. Now, as I said, game is also being used as a medium of learning. It's a pretty influential tool to learn, whether it's games which are being created in an immersive environment using virtual reality, augmented reality, or even smartphone-based games. One typical example is something that we have and displayed at this International Museum Expo, which is the Indian Museum Tycoon, which essentially talks about, how difficult or easy it is to actually manage, operate and curate a museum in today's day and age. We as visitors typically go to a museum, we look at a few artifacts and we walk away, whether or not our interest is to really learn a lot about it or not. But then the game, the Indian Museum Tycoon, is actually around, how is the life of a particular person who's managing the entire museum, and they move on from the level of intern to the museum director. So there are a lot of nuances that happen, and the idea and the key messaging and the thought around creating this game was that when we go to a museum now after playing such a game which is extending beyond the boundaries of the museum, we will really appreciate what is on display. We will start engaging with the artifacts in a very different manner than we used to, earlier. Here are a bunch of boring slides, I typically say, but these are facts and figures and stats. But it's very, very important for all of us to see how the gaming industry itself is, being adopted. How is it growing? What are the new trends? Now, if you see a very quick explanation of the slides is, the games actually started in the 1970s, and I'm specifically talking about the digital games. Now, we all know that the digital era, so-called, is essentially in the 90s. That's what, analysts talk about, that is what the media talks about, technologists talks about. But if you look at this particular aspect of it, the first game was actually, created within the digital format in 1972. Now that's even beyond, way ahead of its time when the internet was invented. That's in the 90s. The games have really evolved from, the console-based, whether it's Nintendo, Sega, and so on, to, arcade styles. We all go to arcades. The modern arcade of today is something called as Smash. I'm sure a lot of people might have gone to Smash. There are a lot of games that we play over there. We engage. There are a lot of tickets that come out and we get a gratification. We get like a teddy bear. So, and then it sort of moved on from, the console. And by the way, consoles still exist. Hardcore gamers like us, we still own consoles. We also, one of our, team outtakes typically we do is around going to the arcades and, having fun. Then the era actually started around PC. That's how the technology was also evolving. The hardware industry was evolving. And when we went to the PC, it gave a birth to a lot of handheld devices. Now, there are, for those of you who don't know, there are a lot of handheld device games, consoles, something like a Nintendo Switch, which is very, very popular these days. It's like a handheld device you can actually just play. There was a popular handheld device called as Game Boy. I think Pokemon was a very prominent game in that device. Then if you see, now here's the trend shift. As the technology was maturing, and as we now called the millennials and the Gen Z, these are the people who have grown up playing games. Why? Because they have now come to their mobile. If you see now just a quick chart on what are the numbers and the opportunities within the mobile and how big is the mobile gaming industry, it's actually growing every day, and it's right now close to $100 billion. So that is where games have really now come. Games have now come to your own pocket. That is the power of, the devices now that you have. But that's not it, right? Because games, as we say, or the digital games, is actually one of the most significant phenomena of this century. And this is not something that we claim, but these are some of the facts. There are reports by the World Economic Forum which says, in the next 3 years, which is 2026, there will be $321 billion spent by people, which is a global people, just on procuring or playing games. Now that's a significant amount of money which will be spent. That means you see how many of folks out there really love playing games and engaging. That's about, that's more of a B2C market. But let's see what are the businesses really doing. There were a lot of prominent entities are, investing in developing games, whether through just mergers and acquisition. One of the such examples was actually Microsoft, and Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard for $69 billion. Now that's a lot of money. And Activision Blizzard, for those of you who don't know, was a company who had published Call of Duty, also known as COD. Very popular game that most of the gamers today they play. A lot of societies, as I was mentioning, and entities are actually using them for various purposes, whether it's around entertainment or it's around even education and training. A lot of corporates have started doing game-based or gamification-based trainings for their employees. The newer ways to really engage with games is with the metaverse and the Web3 ecosystem, where a lot of phenomena around the decentralization is being introduced. And yes, not to forget, games. Here's a quick fact. Games have always had AI ML built into it. I know it's now being highlighted, but gaming is an industry which already had AI and ML for decades now. What are the major trends which is really shaping the industry? We've all heard about 5G. What is it doing? The rise of 5G, it's making the internet faster. It's making your bandwidth with ultra low latency, which means there will be a lot of shared experiences. There will be a lot of connected experiences, multiplayer experiences, faster communication. Then we have seen how the AR and VR industry is really being democratized. If we were to give this presentation 2 years from today, that's in the past, we would not not be talking about AR and VR and its democratization. But today, you know, with what happened at the pandemic, we've really moved fast, and now AR and VR, the way that, you know, they really come under the digital technologies and what is the power that they bring to the industries overall, it has really now come to a stage where it's so easy to make a VR application or an experience or an AR. They have now all come to your mobile with an extension to a VR headset. What is happening to the VR headset, you know, Oculus Quest now is just $300. It's way cheaper than an iPhone. So I think it's now really come in to a segment where it will be commoditized very soon. Everyone will have a VR headset. And as I already mentioned, the target market, the target audience is also shifted. Now we are at that cusp where the decision makers are actually changing. Now the Gen Z, they have now started earning. Now they have the buying power. So how do you really attract and engage the Gen Z, the newer generation who have actually grown up playing games? So one of the medium, since we're talking about games, has to be games. That's something that cannot be a miss while engaging them. A lot of data and analytics and analysis tools are being used on top of games, which tells about the psycho of the players, which tells about their behavior, which could be a very fruitful information for brands. And when I say brands, it's all, you know, museums are also brands. You know, they can really drive a lot of information, you know, where to engage with them, whether if it's around skilling, you know, they understand, okay, if a person is really unlocking this type of a collectible within the game, you know, his or her psycho could be around this, you know, then there could be some information or targeted advertisement, targeted content given to them. Gamification, as I said, because with the 5G, you know, everything is going to be very social, it's going to be very collaborative, connected, so gamification is something where we need a lot of gratifications so that there is that loyalty loop being developed within the industry. In terms of number, I'm just going to skim through a couple of these. If you see, you know, the active number of gamers globally, this is a global number, in 2023 stands at 3.2 billion. Now that's a huge number. Yes, of course, US and some markets are a little ahead of India, but collectively if we see, this is a pretty huge number in terms of you know, how the industry is shaping. We get asked a lot around, are games only for the masculine or the male gender? So we thought, you know, why not pull up a few numbers and really show it over here. If you see on the right-hand side, or the left-hand side primarily, you know, we've taken data from 2010 till 2023. Now, in 2010, you'd be surprised, 60% of the male population were active gamers, and now if you're coming to 2023, you know, the gap is actually narrowing. So games are something now being considered as gender neutral. So it's no longer just limited to the male population. Even the females are, you know, picking up games. We do get a lot of, and it's a proud moment for all of us, because we get a lot of, within India, we get a lot of applications, not only you know, from female gamers, but they also want to develop games. So I think that's a huge shift, I would say, in the mindset of how this entire industry is shaping. Now, the fun part. So, museums have always been a part of your favorite game. There are a lot of games out there which already have a museum at the background. One such example that I want to highlight is actually a game which is called as a Paper Mario. It's an edition of Mario, and what they did was, it's a story around how, you know, Mario has to go about and save a curator, the museum curator, and then there are a lot of quests, and the entire game is around the museum itself. Similarly, one other example was done with the British Museum, um, and the story revolves around how there was a ghost which comes into the museum, and how do you really survive, save your artifacts, and the entire story has the background of a museum. Now, with that thought, I just pass it on to Shrey to give you some of the best practice and what does it really mean for museums to really utilize and put it up in their strategy.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So, how can museums make use of games? And I've kept it extremely simple. It's very non-technical of sorts. What I have here is that there are a given set of categories, and we have a few examples, and I'll talk you through some of these categories, right? So this one is a role-play game. So what you will see here is the sermon of Buddha, and you actually are one of the disciples. So we've actually removed the audio, I guess. And what happens is that you enter Deer Park, and then as one of the disciples, you sort of enter in and move towards Buddha, and then of course, sort of learn about the thing. So I think what Anshul also mentioned was about asymmetric storylines. That's what games do for you. And that's what a VR experience like this is showcasing. So I'll just pause for a moment here and just go through this once. So I've kept it flexible here. We're not sort of being fixated with just VR or just screen-based experiences. The user is sort of going through, and then as a disciple, you would see the view as well. And then there's a quick audio which sort of talks about each sermon. So something like this can be used by a lot of, not only heritage-based experiences, but various experiences can be shown. So this is one of the examples, and you feel that you're the character, right? That's why we play games. Another very interesting example is of American National History Museum. They have a treasure hunt experience, and again, here the medium is augmented reality. And in this one, you can actually move through the various levels. So each level at American National History Museum has a theme, and for each of those levels, they have various games. Now the character here there's a mascot, and it's more like a microbe, and then you sort of go around the various levels in the museum itself and complete the goals of the game. Yeah, this is one of the global examples. Apart from that, a lot of museums have an amazing amount of content which they have with them. And this is one of the examples which we are actually showcasing at our booth as well. You might have seen this arcade-like experience where you actually go in and there are soft toys and you grab one, and if you're lucky, then you're able to get one of those. So this is a VR experience which we're demonstrating here, where if you're lucky enough, then you are able to grab it. As you can see, the user is finding it a bit tough. And once you grab it, then of course, you get a quick information nugget about the artifact itself. So there's a bit of learning and there's a bit of gratification in terms of that information nugget as well. And if you visit the booth, then we are also giving out a flashcard of sorts of the exhibit. Yeah. Another very interesting way in which museums can engage is through puzzle games. So nothing, I mean, we're not sort of reinventing the wheel here, but certainly if you look at it, what we're showcasing here as an example, and it's again at our booth, is a quick jigsaw puzzle around tribal art, right? And I think a few of folks in the audience here have experienced it at our booth as well today. So it's a screenless experience. So I think a big challenge today, which happens at museums, is that we have a lot of screens with AVs running, and of course it's not possible to just remove the screens, right? So this is a quick way of making those screens interactive with interactive puzzles, and puzzles are just the start. Quite honestly, there can be much more if you think through as well. Well, Anshul talked very quickly about the changing demographics. Apart from that, I think anyone who's played or watched a bit of videos about games might have seen Beat Saber. There's a very interesting exhibit here at the NCSM where you use the barcode scanners to play piano, right? So a lot of times games are also about sort of breaking that ceiling and opening it up for non-gamers as well. Folks who might maybe associate a more fun experience, maybe with a bit of dance, maybe with a bit of music as well. And that's where something like a Beat Saber is a prime example of that. It's one of the highest grossing games on Oculus and on VR platforms. And of course, we do have a lot of instruments, musical instruments as well, so it can be very interesting as an experience as well. This is another quick fun trivia game setup now. I would say quizzes are something which we do end up doing a lot, be it academia or be it museum exhibits as well. And this is just another fun way of trivia. So this is a VR trivia game which we created for India Internet Day. The questions which you will see here are around internet. So just a very quick analogy, the user actually picks up a bow and the user can shoot arrows, and the user shoots the arrows at the answer. So if it's the right answer, so there's like a nice sound effect of yay, and if you don't, then it's nay. And that's I think something which can be very quick and very interesting for users, right? So these are some of the quick examples of those. And now coming to our game, which we've recently built, and you guys can check it out also at the booth, which is the Indian Museum Tycoon. The whole idea here was to create a sort of a game which sort of engages people across ages and across genders as well. And it's a game which is not really violent, it's extremely creative. It's around resource management as well. And this is, in the next few slides, we actually just cover what our design journey was of creating this experience. So it can be a very interesting journey for all of you to see. So yes, the problem statement here was that a lot of times kids today or teenagers today might find museums a bit boring. And how can you make it more engaging and a more fun experience for them, right? So since all of us have smartphones, we chose the smartphone platform as the go-to platform for this. And we wanted to have a quick story around that itself. So while thinking of what you could have to make people engage around museums, we felt, well, I've played a lot of Tycoon games, and so have our team members. And we felt that through our research and through examples also, that Tycoon games can be a very interesting way to engage with audience as well. So we've chosen an isometric art style which sort of gives you a quick view. It's a bit real as well, and thanks to the Ministry of Culture and the various nodal bodies, we got a very, very interesting 3D artifacts as well. So all the artifacts which you see are from, sourced from the museums as well. These are some of the concept artists, and we have our team here, Priyanka and Satyik and Adyan making those. So, of course, whenever it's about a game, you start with the first prototype, and this is what the first prototype looked like. More corporate-ish, if you may, right? And this was the example UI, which we had, more isometric view with a few grid styles. And this is what the inventory menu looked like. When we sort of did a quick trial run in the UAT for the first version, what we realized was we lacked an economy. So while we had built the game, it was a bit too boring. There was no storyline to it, so we needed to make it more engaging. And there had to be some kind of level progression. So that's why we will play games, right? There's a start and an end, unlike life, right? It goes on, right? So instead of us taking a very non-linear approach, we added a storyline and we added a museum director who sort of sends you a job request and you start from as an intern in the museum itself. And then you move through the ranks, through the challenges which come your way. There's a quick video which talks about it. I don't think we have this now. Oops. There's a quick video which sort of showcases what are the various aspects. There's a storyline. You progress through the beats. So, of course, as you keep developing the museum and adding exhibits, you can also unlock daily mystery boxes, which enables you to discover new exhibits every now and then. So, everyone has the capability to actually build a different museum as well. So you can actually discover and exhibit a lot of different museums as well. And this one is a very quick summary of the last video itself. And here we take you through various facets of the game itself, and it's a bit more in detail, so you can see the game quests which are there, how you place the exhibits. So as you see, there's a storyline while you're going on a curatorial journey. And there's a card-based system, so if you folks have played a bit of Clash Royale, there are cards which you unlock and characters and all. So we felt that that's something which a lot of teenagers or millennials and Gen Z would associate with as well. As you move, I think there would be a community as well around this. And we do have AI integrated here, so you can sort of hire agents to clean up the museum and those sort of things. Yeah. So yes, that's pretty much it. We are open for questions. We'll be happy to address any queries that you have. Oops. There's no mic, right? Okay. Oops. Or we could connect offline if you want.
So namaskar, I am Tanya Bangari. I'm a communication designer and a researcher as well. So my question here is that while looking at your design and everything, what made you actually choose the style to be like that of the museum and the logo as well? I mean, was there a thought process behind that particular style which you are actually showcasing in your game?
Yeah, I'll let the logo thing be answered by Adya. You want to come? Or you want to address that itself, you can address that. We have our team here, so that's the luxury which we have right now. Yeah, I mean, whatever, whichever way it is. Satwik.
Yeah, so we basically took inspiration from showing the rich heritage of India. For example, we used a lot of gold in our design language. We also played around with the materials of different artifacts that we have in the game, and we made those into our UI and our background screens as well. So we have our concept artist, she created the background for it, and the font style also we chose a bit to be a bit classy, classical. Yeah, basically that was our inspiration.
So for the tycoon thing that we researched, right, we found a lot of low poly games on the internet. We did not find a lot of high poly, high resolution games on that in isometry. So we thought, we have, as an Indian culture, we are a very high resolution, detail oriented game place, right, in countries. So why not make a high poly game?
Thanks for your thanks out to you. Oh, we have one question, sir.
Hello, my name is Shivam and I'm working in a museum. So my question is, if any museum wanted to create their own game, so how would your firm will help in that way? Or as you say, kids, if they really don't know any coding about that, so they can create their own games. So in that way, what can you do in that way?
So see, I think the first step would be how you are defining the problem statement at your end as well, let's say at the museum itself. So for example, is it to engage people at the museum itself, or is it to spread awareness to bring in footfalls, right? And I think generally once you define that, then it helps you address other questions. So first, of course, would be the aim and then the target devices which we're looking at. Once you have defined that, then I think a game development agency can certainly define the track and route for you. As far as, let's say, our platforms and our approaches would be concerned, it's very similar for any game development studio. It would be this itself, that we first define what the objective is, then the target devices, and then we roll it out. So for example, if it is doing a treasure hunt of sorts within the museum where you want some circulation and you want to do something like a Pokemon Go kind of a thing, right? So then the question would be, do you want it to be like a web AR, or do you want it to be on an app itself? And that sort of takes you to another branched out question. Do you have the app itself currently? If you have, then mostly you would like to embed it within the app itself. Otherwise, you might actually straight away go for a web AR because you might already have a website, right? So just saying, this is just one example, but I would say it would be a layered answer. But generally, this is the track which anyone would take. I hope that addresses.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you.
I think we have one.
So for this particular game, what was the timeline like? Like how much time did you guys guys spend making this game and to develop it?
3 months? Yeah, a quarter. Yeah, we actually first had a prototype, then once we had a prototype, like I showed you, then we moved into the nitty-gritties of it.
And see, you need to be cognizant of the fact that a lot of the artifacts that we're using are real. So I think, procurement of the digital artifacts, or if we were to create the digital, that's all built into this timeline. If it's something which is very fictitious, for example, just say, that could be a very faster timeline to create. So if you're working with something very real, the information about that has to be very, very genuine as well. So I think that's what took, that's why we're saying it's a quarter-long activity for someone like us.
Thank you so much. I think we're done with the questions, right?
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you to Anshul and Shri for a great presentation. We're just going to take a 5-minute break to set up the stage for our virtual performance. Please stick around. It's going to be a great performance. It's storytelling in Urdu about museums, and it's been curated for our show. In the meantime, there's another round of quizzes and some freebie bags. So please stay.
खाना बनाया नहीं तब तक गए थे भाई ये निकाल दूँ निकाल दूँ ना इसको
Good evening. Welcome to